Hi, everybody. I'm Walter. I'm the Dutch mentor. Welcome back to the S.M.A.R.T Performance Podcast, where S stands for self-care, M for mindful growth, A for adaptive problem solving, R for rhythmic operation, P for building a thriving community, and P for performance, of course. Today, I'm really happy to have Justin here from Project 55. We're going to have a deep and meaningful conversation around mental health. Remember, it's one of the 5 pillars I talk about all of the time. If those pillars, right, if that sub-foundation is not strong, and maintained, you too will live in a crumbling house. So again, today is about action. It's about 15 minutes of quick conversation, takeaways. And if you have any doubts, go to my to the Dutch Mentor in the App Store, download the app today and start your free trial. Justin, thank you very much for joining me today in conversation. And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me. Yes, so I'm the co-founder of Project 55. We are a 501c3 nonprofit focused on transforming mental health outcomes in the workplace. And we do that specifically through engagement with conferences, speaking and talking on the matter, but also a very hands-on practical training program that teaches the everyday individual how to step in when someone else is in crisis. And really what we do is find a way that we can quickly equip somebody so that whether or not they've ever experienced what another person's struggling through, they have the tools and resources available to step in and be that care person. Because as you'll probably discuss with your class later tonight, the system in our country for healthcare, especially mental health care, is very difficult. And oftentimes you're waiting 6 to 8 weeks if you have to use insurance to try and get into a mental health provider, and it can be even longer than that. And so we found such a need in the marketplace for someone to step in between that buys time for the professionals to come in when others are in crisis.
Listen, it's phenomenal, and I 100% agree with you. It's a massive gap, and that many people who are not compliant with medications are often not compliant because they have mental health issues that are either underdiagnosed or not actively being treated. In the workplace, and especially in healthcare, the scariest statistic out there today is about 64% of our healthcare providers are at or near burnout. And at or near burnout is not, I can't sleep at night, but these people have really, potentially serious underlying stressors that really, that accentuate, mental health issues if there are any, and that can lead to, suicide and other types of outcomes. And sadly, I've lost not too many friends to suicide. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart and very, very important. All right, I want to start at the beginning because, providing mental health is great, having access to mental health. But the first thing people need to admit, I have a problem, right? Because there is a bad, deep stigma to mental health issues. Tell me a little bit about that, and how can people recognize that they are heading towards trouble?
So it's a major problem. I've had people reach out to me and even concerned to use the EAP within their company because they were concerned that a manager might find out that they were using those resources and what happens if. And I think for a lot of people, they see that someone breaks a leg and we will provide care if someone breaks a leg, but if someone's struggling internally, that's not given the same level of empathy and support. And so what I tell people typically is, right away if every day you wake up and it's gloomy. When you're disinterested in things that used to make you excited. When your fuse is short and you're sharper with a child when you're correcting them than you need to be. When you're getting feedback from a coworker on a project and it's constructive criticism designed to help you, but it hurts too much inside. These are all little flags that we see throughout the day that says, hey, I'm on red. I need some help. And oftentimes people need permission to actually seek out that help. And my little side tangent here is that's why the onboarding process is so critical when someone comes into the organization, because if the organization doesn't say that your actual health and welfare is more important than what you do here, they will always put what they do against who they really are and their internal value. And I think so often we find that we just don't spend the time to really educate people on what's available to them and the expectation that we're all going to have B days and we're going to have C days. And if you stack up enough of those, it's going to go south really quickly eventually. And we care enough that we'd rather you address it, provide you the time to do it, the resources to do it, than have you suffer and then see the impacts to your family.
Yeah, and the scary part is that most people think about the diagnoses, right? Is that and how that is going to linger in your medical record for the rest of your life, and how that can become a stigma. As a pilot, helicopter and fixed wing pilot, one of the things in aviation that some people are fighting today is that people are deadly afraid to say that I have some situational depression, because if you write that on your medical application, you actually can lose your is actually punished. God bless. I've never been depressed in my life, so I cannot relate to that. But having seen that as working paramedic for over 30 years and a flight medic and as a healthcare executive, I've seen it around me a lot. And I think that we as a community need to become more attentive to the symptoms that people who are suffering from mental health, wellness issues are sending to us, because most of them are sending. So talk a little bit about the responsibility. So yes, the employer needs to promote EAP not once, but continuously. They need to create that safe zone. But I think that we as a collective need to do a better job too. What should we be looking out for the people who we care for and love in the community, that says, hey, listen, maybe it's time for us to step in or to lend a hand or to raise awareness?
I think the biggest thing I see in organizations is you have leadership that has been through some type of mental health crisis in almost every organization. And so I always challenge them, talk about it. I myself am a suicide survivor, and if not for the help of others, I wouldn't be here today. And I think part of removing that stigma is saying to your team members, hey, like, it's okay. I struggled with this too, but past that, it's actually working on these relationships. I'm conducting another research project on best friends, both at home, but in the workplace. And so few people feel safe that they have even one person they can turn to at the office. And so we've got to work on building trust. So if you can get a leader who's going to focus on saying, hey, I've been there too, or an individual who may not be in a leadership capacity, but is brave enough to share this, and then also say, and we are going to invest in the relationships we have here because we spend all this time together. It's a great way to say, you can be that support person, and you don't have to do the heavy lifting like a psychologist. We can demystify what the support looks like. And we do a lot of that in our training. But once you have leadership saying, I struggle with this too, and we're going to invest in relationships, and relationships actually do matter. It's not just a tagline on our brand, and it's not just one of our value statements, but when it's actually lived throughout, we see outcomes improve pretty quickly across the board.
Yeah, I like that setup. So vulnerability and emotional intelligence are one of the key earmarks of or attributes of a highly effective leader. Right? It is that it's something that is not something you're born with. It's something that needs to be developed and continuously maintained. It's like a muscle, and that needs to be built, and the strength needs to be maintained in the gym. Otherwise, you'll lose that as well. So there's a really powerful words. The other thing that I find is that, and maybe you can relate to that as well, especially as a survivor, is that most of the time people are giving signals, and these signals often can be found in our social media post or communication to people that we love. That every single one of my friends, and plural, sadly, who committed suicide over the last 10, 15, 20 years, every single one of them left little breadcrumbs behind on social media, asking and then screaming for help. And the thing is, we are so caught up in our own lives that we don't pay attention to the little things. So, tell us a little bit about what that could look like, or again, as a leader, is it just your responsibility to keep your finger on the pulse, or how can we be more open to that, to kind of pick up on those signals when somebody might be heading for a crisis?
So one of the unfortunate things is leadership is usually the last to know. And what happens is that we don't equip the everyday coworker to spot those signs. And so I believe when people talk about our training, I'm like, no, you want to train, yeah, you want to train your leader, but get to the field support staff first, because they're the ones first on scene. And so what you can focus on is, number one, am I in relationship with people? Does everybody have somebody they can go to within that organization that they trust? If they do, then, and you are in a genuine relationship with someone, you then are likely seeing their social media posts, and so you could see all of a sudden they start talking about things as if time is going to come to an end, like time is short. You may see that disinterest. You may see that they used to join the team for lunch, and now they're suddenly busy, and they just talk about, oh, I'm just overwhelmed, but this keeps stacking up. You may see that level of frustration. One thing I see a lot is that person who's in a healthy space is able to deploy a lot more empathy in conversations. Once we're in crisis, it's very hard to see anybody else. And if you watch people in conversations when this is going on, and you've got a coworker who's hearing about another friend struggling, you will oftentimes see a disengagement, as if they couldn't take any more of grief, pain, suffering put into their cup. And so what you'll see is, from a facial perspective, they'll kind of go less emotional, and you'll see them not ask the follow-up questions, which can come off as uncaring, but it's usually a sign, when you look at some of these other things, that I'm struggling. Past that, you look at people who suddenly gaining weight or suddenly losing weight. And those type of things. There's a number of different things to spot, but I think the biggest thing is you have to be in relationship with somebody of a genuine type to be able to spot things. You, as a CEO of a company, walking around the office and talking to people once a week is not going to be enough to spot it. But Janie, who sees Jack every day, and now he's coming in late, and he's struggling to make it out for team functions, or the work product suffers. Those are the frontline people. Those are the ones who can spot it. But they also have to be given the power to say, this is a big enough issue, and I'm going to address it with the person and have that conversation. And if I really think it's a dangerous issue, then I'm going to elevate it to leadership. I care more about, I would rather be wrong and save a life than, be in a situation where I'm sitting there and I think they're totally fine because I'm just overthinking this whole process. I don't have the conversation, and then nobody's there. I was working with a therapist, and I somehow ended up consulting and helping a lot of these therapists who are dealing with some of these cases, because I think they wanted somebody non-clinical talking to them about this. And the mere act of following up is so powerful. When somebody says to you, here's my situation, I'm struggling, the fact you follow up 3 days later is hugely important. That's why those psychologists, they take notes and they go through that process. But also, it's important, if you haven't said it to someone you're in a relationship, I don't care what it is, what shame you may feel. I would be upset if you were not on this planet. And so as such, if you're ever feeling in a low place, and hopefully well before you're at that super low place, I'm a safe person to talk to. And make that known, and make that known more than once. And it works with therapists because they're the trained professional that people keep coming back. I had this therapist, he made the patient promise him, because he was struggling with suicidal ideation, and he says numerous times, if this is ever at that red line, you promise you'll call me, because otherwise I'm going to be insulted that I wasn't valuable enough in your life. He went through it and he made this big deal of it. Well, 2 weeks ago, I'm in the ER, my son's having surgery on a different issue. I get this call, and he said, Justin, the follow-up I did with this person and how I did this was the difference. He had called me from the bridge, and he was ready to jump, but he felt guilty in the moment that he had betrayed the friendship if he at least didn't make the phone call, which allowed the therapist to, at the same time, get the emergency resources there, get there himself, get the person out of that situation. But it was because, again, that reinforced message of, I'm here, I'm not judging you, and following up, because your story, you're not an extra in somebody else's story. You're the main character of your own life, And by the way, you're a main character in mine. And so I'm going to keep following up so you know that you have somebody. And if we can hammer that home, then a lot less people are going to find themselves isolated at the worst moments.
Yeah, well said. I think that the responsibility of the leader is, to love the people that they lead, which means you need to show genuine care, not once a year or twice a year, but on a continuous basis. You need to go out and ask that question, how are you, from a genuine way? And then if you hear somebody say, grandma died a couple of days ago, not just condolences, but go back a couple of days from now. What I do with the people who are around me, if there's an unfortunate death in the family, I put it on my calendar to remind myself to actually follow up with them on a weekly basis, just as a check-in. So I call it Reach Out Wednesday, ROW. So that's when I reach out to the people, and I do this consistently for 3 or 4 months until I have a feeling that people are in a good space. The other thing I want to mention is that situational depression is also a real issue. That people who can normally be very healthy, but can get into a situation like pain or a death or something extraneous or stress or that can cause temporary state of mental illness that needs to be treated. And again, we need to be so hyper aware of this and really be mindful about that. I love the fact that you say we need to talk about that as they come into the organization. We need to set that safe zone. So I would encourage the listeners today to think about what Justin just said, is that, do you have somebody that you trust that you can have a conversation with? And are you a boss of people that have you created that safe zone that people feel comfortable to talk enough without having a fear of retribution or being labeled as something? And that is an actionable takeaway that we can do. Justin, I mean, obviously I feel passionate about this topic. I can talk about this for hours, but where can we find you?
Yes, you can find our organization, project55.org. Our 10-hour training is fully free. All it is, first name, last name, email. It's basically a tactical guide on how to step in when people are in crisis, and not just diagnosable mental illnesses, but we go through 12 different life situations. We give you the words to use, what not to use, how to respond, how to give actual support. It's all in there. And then if I can just give one challenge, if you are listening, even if you feel like you're not in the spot to go through a training like that, you could put 988 on your phone and save it as the contact. Every time I speak at conferences, everyone says to me, well, I don't want to call the suicide hotline for like a minor issue. And people don't understand it's the suicide and crisis hotline. That number is there for a reason. And even if you did nothing more than add the 988 number into your contacts, and when someone was struggling, if you felt you didn't have the words, you can dial that number, hand the phone to that person, and somebody who's a trained professional can step in, and that can be the difference between someone taking their own life and willing to say, I'm going to give it another go, and I'm going to try one more day.
Listen, rock solid advice. And I think that I learned too yesterday, by the way. We talk about some of the elderly people who fall and they cannot call 911, but they can call out their telephones. In order for 911 or 988 to work with Siri or Google or Alexa, you actually have to, what you just said, you have to put it into your contact information so it's for easy recall. Justin, thank you very much for the heroic work that you do. Glad that you came through your crises and able to give back. And that's really, people need to hear from the people who have been there. It's more relatable. Give me a final thought.
Final thought, more people are hurting than you could imagine. And you just throw a stone and someone's struggling. So approach every conversation knowing that someone likely is living a nightmare you know nothing about, and treat them with the kindness that you'd want when you're in that spot.
Listen, there's nothing else I need to say to that. I think that is so true. Again, to the audience, remember that leadership is not just coming to work and finishing a project. Leadership is about leading people. And the people are your most valuable asset. Forget about anything else. And if you look at a group of people, of 100 people, remember that the statistic today is 64 out of those 100 are struggling to some extent coming to work every day. That's maybe at home, at work, or in between. Be attentive to that. Be a great leader. Ask the question, how are you today? And follow up, as Justin said. Thank you very much for coming and joining me today on the show. Very valuable. Very much appreciate that. And to the audience, again, take action. Without action, you cannot get the outcomes you seek. We'll see you at the next episode, everybody. Thank you.